Welcome to our weekly news cable cast. I'm Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. Here to help me with this week's news is my co-anchor, Mr. Kevin Berglund. Thank you, Mr. Berglund, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we have a jam-packed news hour for you today. We are going to continue our report on the joint meeting of the Housing, Economic, and Development Commission with the Maplewood City Council. Now, we have covered this on a number of newscasts previously, but this particular meeting on January 27th, 2020 was about two and a half hours long. Now, we would have had more film footage than that. However, there was a little snafu up at City Hall with regard to when the meeting actually started. Now, was it a snafu or was it intentional to keep the public out of the loop? We don't know, but we'll leave it to you to come to your own conclusion. Now, Mr. Berglund, you were our film reporter out there that day. What were some of your initial observations when you first arrived at City Hall?
Well, the City of Council of Maplewood with the city staff, they're real daredevils. And again, they publish on their website. They're starting their meeting at 5. I found they're in session already. Apparently, and I did not know what time they had began their meeting, but again, I found that out as time went on. It looks like they had started it an hour prior. Of course, what do you get out of Melinda Coleman except one of her little snickers? Like, why do you expect to have a seat here watching us if you're not on our campaign team? Because up at Maplewood under Mary Abrams, I think her policy is you have a seat at the table if you're here to serve us.
It's something that Jeff and Mike and I have talked about pretty consistently over the last 2 years.
So this is, we're, just for sense of scale, we're 3 minutes ahead of schedule, so it's right on track. Wonderful.
So there we are, taking a snapshot of the clock on the wall, 5 o'clock. Mr. Berglund got there at the appointed time, just when it said on the internet the meeting was going to start, and yet he finds the meeting in progress with the facilitator, the assistant city manager, saying, oh, we're 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Well, that's because they started at 4 o'clock. Now, of course, we asked some people about this. What's going on? Well, let's take a look at one of the responses.
It could have been just a misunderstanding on the website. I haven't looked at it yet.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so don't trust the website, trust the board.
No.
You should trust the website. I gotta go.
I mean, I'm going by the website. I guess I can come up here every day.
Make sure it's fixing the website.
Because you guys aren't recording this at all, are you?
No, we don't have the ability to do sound the way with
3 tables.
Okay,
it's hard to.
And I just want to alert you that I did sound last time, and there was no problem. Do you need some suggestions on what kind of camera to get, or?
I think it's because
you have 3 conversations going on at once.
Right.
Okay.
You're never going to be able to broadcast that with 3 conversations going on at once, where it's of any use to anybody.
Okay. How was the mic? You had a camera.
I'm going on at once.
Yeah. Get started.
Okay. You would find that hard to do. Last time.
So the response is, well, let's go over here to the bulletin board where we do our legal postings and see what time it says for the posting of the meeting. Lo and behold, there in the glass cage, the notice for the meeting does say 4 o'clock. However, on the website, which is where the public gets their information from, it says 5 o'clock. And Mr. Berglund, you asked him, well, so that means we can't trust the website? And Mr. Joe Sheeran specifically said, oh, no, you could trust the website.
And of course, he is the head of the communication department up at Maplewood. Now, of course, the other option, if they don't put the time accurately on the website, you could see if you might find an agenda, because they claim to put the agenda in the minutes and maybe a packet on the website, but of course, there's none of those. You look in the back of the room, when you end up there at this city meeting, there's no agenda. Now, this is what they did. They wrote the agenda on a tablet in front of the council. But of course,
that was on an easel.
Yes, but of course, how can anybody do their homework? I mean, the city council, the city staff, and the commission members, all these people have valuable time. How can they do their homework to prepare to come to the meeting if the city doesn't even have an agenda of what they're going to do? Of course, did they really have an agenda other than the one on the easel, or didn't they?
And also, how is the public to know if it is a meeting they wish to attend if they don't know what the topic is, if they don't know what issues might be addressed, what are the concerns that people are going to talk about, even if there's going to be public comment allowed at the meeting? Why would a member of the public even say, well, I'm going to go to a random meeting that I just know is going to happen, but I don't know what's going to go on there? The only people that do things like that is, Put Your Hands Together Productions. Here we are. Well, let's take a look at our next clip with the continuing discussion with Mr. Joe Sheeran and the discussion about the microphones. Because keep in mind, last time when we were at their meeting back in November, we were told that they were not recording it because they had a problem with microphones and that they couldn't pick anything up. And of course, as you know, watching our shows, our microphones had no problems, and our camera is a fraction of the cost of their camera. But let's take a look at his comments.
You had a camera. How did the mic come out last time when you guys did the camera here?
I don't know. And on which one? We had.
Well, you had your first one of
we had
these.
a photographer here who was getting B-roll.
He was, yeah, okay.
Getting B-roll.
Yeah, but did he?
Recording all of
Well, he had a huge mic, and he had a sound in his ears, so he was getting. He was concerned about sound quality.
Sound from one person at a time.
Okay.
He wasn't getting the whole conversation at once. So if you're doing, it's anybody who broadcasts.
How about the people over at CCO?
CCO. Ask the person at the CCO. They'll tell you, if you try to record 3 conversations going on at once,
Okay.
and you try to broadcast it live,
Okay.
people are talking, you're not going to, who are you going to listen to? Which one of the 3 conversations are you going to listen to?
Okay. Are you broadcasting or are you cable casting? Or you? What do you call what you guys are doing?
Well, you would broadcast, we do it both ways. We broadcast on Channel 6, well, our normal meetings, our public meetings. We broadcast on Channel 16.
Okay.
And we also simultaneously cast them on the web. We
Okay.
broadcast them.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Mr. Berglund, why is this an important distinction?
I think this conversation continues to go pear-shaped. As you can see, he is the expert. He is the director of communications. His former wife is a member on the CCO anchor team. I think he's pretty well knowledgeable of just basic terminology. And of course, CBS, CCO, broadcasts, sends it over the airwaves. Unfortunately, they never had the ability and never ever have sent anything, to the best of my knowledge, over the airwaves at City Hall. They might have cast it like Chromecast, but I don't think they did that. I think they cablecast. Cablecast is when you're sending it over a wire, not broadcast. And I want to just be certain to see if they were broadcasting now, because they never have before, or they were cablecasting. He says they're broadcasting. Do you believe it?
No, because they're putting it on Channel 16. They're one government channel that's, by the way, given to them by Comcast, a cable company. I think they're cable casting. Woohoo! And of course, those of you watching us on public access TV, guess what? We're cable casting too. We don't broadcast. Well, there you go. So it's important that your professionals who are out there in the field with their big, long resumes claiming to do what they can do, that they actually know what field and market they're in and exactly what it is they are doing. Well, let's continue with our report from this meeting. Now, before we do, we want to step back a couple of steps because in our last news report, Mr. Berglund and I, we talked about some of the issues of development and redevelopment in Maplewood. And then specifically on off-the-record news, I had film footage to show where Maplewood at this meeting on January 27th specifically were addressing that redevelopment that they have envisioned in their minds, their big vision, for the north end of Maplewood, the Maplewood Mall area. And in off-the-record news, I demonstrated and showed where the City of Maplewood administrators and City Council are specifically working an agenda that is in conflict and interferes with the private business interests of private business in Maplewood. Well, this is where we're going to jump off from today. So to get us started, I want to go back a month or so, 2 months ago, to when the myth came before Maplewood City Council when they were having their administrative hearing on the renewal of their liquor license. Remember, the myth has sued the City of Maplewood for inappropriately and unconstitutionally putting limits on their liquor license and interfering with their ability to contract and do business. So here we are with the attorney for the myth specifically outlining one of their claims.
Your failure resulted not only in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages to my client, but resulted in the city being sued by my client to hold you accountable. Your failures also resulted in the real estate developer that we had obtained that wanted to build a $20 million hotel next to the myth to abandon the project.
This is part of the interference of contract. They also described other interference of contract that occurred as a result of the city's actions against the myth. However, this one in particular is very important because the city has been very involved in putting together this whole big North End study with their recommendations about how they are going to guide the land use up by the Maplewood Mall. So Mr. Berglund, of course, you were there at that hearing. And what was your takeaway from observing the council when they were being told the ramifications of these actions by the council?
And I don't think they were happy with the attorney because although the attorney represented the myth, I don't think the city manager, the city council, and Maplewood city attorney wanted him to spill the beans. And he poured them right out.
North End study and its recommendations, the city is hoping to have those approved as part of the changes to the comprehensive plan that Maplewood is having for their 2040 comprehensive plan. So in essence, it is putting it out there for the public and for developers that this is City Hall's vision for a very prime commercial property. So it puts everybody else who's there in limbo. There's an ambiguity now that's created. Are they going to be demoed to have housing put in their place instead? Are we okay that all the businesses go belly up because we've got other bigger, better plans that don't involve the business community? We're just going to put in a bunch of high-density housing to support Ramsey County's BRT, bus rapid transit? Well, coming back to our meeting from January 27th, 2020, let's hear the answer to that question.
Just make a comment. I think it's interesting that I really like it that the plan works regardless of what happens to Maplewood Mall. In other words, say retail survives and we do the mall, whoever owns it, figures out a way to keep it going, has a retail mall with some entertainment or whatever, great. This plan works with that. But if you make it worst case scenario for Maplewood Mall and it just goes belly up and it gets bulldozed and whatever, this plan works with that too. And I think that's really the strength of this plan.
So however it works out, you survive, all the more power to you. Now, we played a clip a couple weeks ago, Mr. Bergman, do you recall, where Councilmember Brian Smith was at the meeting in November and gave his theory of business Darwinism, where his position was, well, you know what, we don't need to be here to help anybody survive, and even if we're putting a road project in front of their business and they can't survive, well, they were probably teetering on the brink of destruction anyway. So why should we put up signs to make sure that their customers can get to their business during road construction? Do you recall that particular theory?
All this is, believe it or not, because it is unbelievable, if the city goes in and they mess up the roads, and they close the roads, or they do other things to hurt small businesses, if small businesses don't survive, well, I guess it wasn't their destiny or in the cards for them to survive anyway.
Yeah, we'll just put high-density housing in their place because after all, that's really what our big agenda is. And that high-density housing, a high portion of it is voucher housing. So is that going to help Maplewood's property tax base? The need for this housing is to support the investment of the BRT. Not because we have that housing shortage in Maplewood. It's not because we have more jobs and not enough housing for all the workers. It's not because the people who are living here are going just a short distance to their work in White Bear Lake or St. Paul. No. It's so that we can say we are supporting the effort and the investment of the BRT and doing our part in Maplewood so that all the people who are going to use that BRT someday, well, that they can live within a block or two of it. That's the only reason.
It sounds like a cartoon, an episode of the cartoon Pinky and the Brain. In this pretend study, I don't think they even addressed where any of these people would have any jobs.
No.
I mean, unless, I guess, their big plan is to send them up to, and they have not talked about this, but when they eliminate all the jobs that are around the mall, including their hope, it looks like, to eliminate the myth, maybe they can send them up to the big job buffet down in the city of St. Paul. Or if that is, I guess maybe they're going to send them all up to Polaris in Forest Lake.
Except the BRT doesn't go to Forest Lake. Yes. Well, let's take a look at the next follow-up comment with regard to what this one of the commissioners sees as in the plans, though. No matter if the Maplewood Mall fails and goes belly up or not, this plan, as you heard him say, is going to work either way. And what does he see in the plans, Maplewood's plans? Let's take a look.
But for multiple reasons, I'd like to see a hotel. And I think if the developer came forward this summer, it's conceivable that within 2 years, certainly ground could be broken, if not construction completed. I just think there's a real practical, when you think about it, it is kind of weird that if you want to, like, I go to church here in Maplewood, we bring in speakers for our conference once a year, right? We have to put them up. Away, and it's not a big deal, but it just seems weird, right? That you have to drive 15 minutes to get to a hotel when you live in a suburban metropolitan area. That seems like there should be a nice, a decent, just any hotel, right? We're not looking for something fancy.
If a developer comes forward, he can see that a hotel will be up in 2 years. If a developer comes forward. So, is Maplewood working with developers, showing off parcels, trying to find somebody who's interested in developing a hotel? Well, that's a good question. Now, if we look at their map from their North End study and the recommendations, they're looking, the city is looking, that a hotel should be right there along Beam Avenue next to the hospital in place of one of the wings of Birch Run Shopping Mall. Let's hear what the Community Development Director of Maplewood says about Birch Run and the space there.
You know, there's more work to do on developer meetings. Just some of the initial feedback that I've heard, probably might count that out, but we've shown people Gladstone properties, like the Moose Lodge, and also like the site, for Birch Run. In general, the reaction on Moose Lodge is, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. And yeah, that's okay, I can see that. You talk about, family, go, oh, wow, yeah. Oh, wow. Like they can see it, but it's a much very much more complex thing that takes a lot more challenges than just an initial investment.
Now we can understand why the city might be showing off the Moose Lodge site in the Gladstone neighborhood. Mr. Berglund, they bought it, didn't they?
Your city mothers and fathers, as Mary Abrams and Melinda Coleman, they own this, they own the lodge, and they own the property.
They do.
In other words, the taxpayers own this.
That's right. So it's natural that they would be showing a developer that site because maybe they're trying to get it out of their portfolio, considering they have so many parcels in the Gladstone area. They're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to find somebody to buy that albatross, right? But does the city of Maplewood own the Birch Run Shopping Center? They do not. Why is the city showing Birch Run Shopping Center to developers? Do you think, Mr. Berglund, at the same time they're showing them that center, they're also showing them the map from their North End study that shows a hotel right there off Beam Avenue next to the hospital where Birch Run has part of its shopping center? Do you think that they're doing the big share?
Yeah, well, it seems like they're, whatever they're showing, they're going bananas. Wow.
Wow. So then it makes you go back to that clip where the attorney for the myth talked about their contract rights and their development potential to construct a hotel near the myth next to the intersection of White Bear Avenue and 694 has been basically obliterated by the actions of City Hall. And yet here we have City Hall behind the scenes showing developers Birch Run Shopping Center, coincidentally right where the city wants to have a hotel. And you've got a commissioner saying that if the right developer comes forward, he can see one will go up within 2 years.
Real down to earth.
Wow. So now this is maybe the reason they don't want the public in on these meetings. Maybe this is why they start their meeting at 4 o'clock and don't have agenda posted. Maybe this is the reason that they just shrug it off that they can't have a working microphone at these meetings so that you can hear what they have to say.
There's an extremely positive city for you.
Well, now next then, let's take a look at what Mark Jenkins, who he is the head of the Housing and Economic Development Commission, his projected timeline for development up by the mall.
It's not Birch Run. I know there was some talk of develop the strip center north of the mall. No, what's it? Okay, so what am I thinking? Yeah.
And Pizza Ranch?
Yeah, Pizza Ranch. No, not that, not all the way to Pizza Ranch. It has one, like, Asian steak place in it.
Right. Next to, across from Macy's? Yes.
Yeah.
Across White Bear Avenue.
Yeah. So that's one
That's
kind of
completely
basically.
full. I mean, that's a.
Is it?
So one of the things that was,
He's talking north of the mall? North of the,
Like on the back.
there's one in Bocce.
Oh, the other little one, okay. And the shrimp, the one on the east side. No, one on the east side. Yeah, gotcha.
So Mark Jenkins hasn't quite got to his timeline yet. He will. But what he's getting to here is that he's thinking in the back of his mind somewhere, he heard that there was going to be a potential development of the strip mall that's mostly vacant, that's up by County Road D, north of the mall, across from the Pizza Ranch, and that there was maybe going to be some kind of development there. And of course, nobody can remember that mall because it's only been mostly vacant for 15 years. And nobody can quite remember it. They can't pinpoint it. And even city manager Melinda Coleman, you notice, Mr. Bergman, she was all confused about this, and she's the city manager. But you see, none of them could say, oh, I guess that's the little strip mall that's a block away from the Myth. Oh, I wonder if that's where the Myth wanted to put their hotel. Was that the development you're talking about, Mr. Jenkins? Oh, gee, Mr. Bergman, were you surprised when you heard this burst out of Mr. Mark Jenkins' mouth that he was pinpointing exactly where you might put a hotel if you were building a hotel up by the Myth?
And of course, Melinda Coleman, she's not only been the community development director, the assistant city manager, now the city manager has been hanging around City Hall forever. Even though she doesn't live in the city, she, after 25 years of being in top administrative positions of the city, you would think everything would be, I mean, she wouldn't need cards anymore. But like you said, wow, Mark, I think the reaction was, Mark, don't bring that up because we're being sued on that point.
Yeah, Mark, don't say anymore. Maybe if we ignore it and pretend we don't know what parcel he's talking about, it'll go away soon. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Those put your hands together people. They got their camera here. They might catch on. Oh. Well, Mark Jenkins does get to his idea of the timeline for development up there by the Maplewood Mall. We heard the one guy saying he thought if the developer came forward, there'd be a hotel built down there on Beam Avenue, you know, within 2 years. Well, here we go. Here's Mark Jenkins' timeline.
Maybe more than 2 years. I think the BRT stops are going to, I think there will be a little bit of a wait and see. Will the mall survive or fade more? Will the BRT come in? I think there may be a little bit of developers holding their cards close to their vest to see how those play out.
sure.
I think in 2 years, you know, they put a shovel in the ground for the BRT stops. Beyond that, I don't know if there's going to be anything of major impact that the normal economy wouldn't have driven already, you know, Chick-fil-A.
He's saying, okay, this all hinges on if they put a shovel in the ground for the BRT, then something will happen 2 years once that shovel goes in the ground. Otherwise, really, quite frankly, everything will just go along according to the market. Well, now that seems pretty realistic. But Mr. Berglund, there are some megalomaniacs up there at City Hall, aren't there?
Well, Mark Jenkins seems like he's trying to be rational about this whole subject, but as you can see, I don't know if they're writing these city planners and city officials and city managers and the city council, whether they're writing a movie script of some megalomaniac vision, or if this is what they call a better structured action agenda. But I'm thinking, the way everybody's flipping these ideas on the fly, I think they're trying to put the big Academy Award winning movie together of the blossoming of the mega quick blossoming of a huge, extravagant, big destination center vision. And of course, it's out of this world.
But here's the reality of it, is that what is the purpose of the destination? If the purpose of the destination is simply, well, there's no myth to go to because you don't have an entertainment center there anymore. You don't have a mall there anymore where people are going to go for shopping or for the events that are at the mall. So if you don't have a mall anymore, and that the hospital is, because of health insurance considerations and the changes in technology and surgery, that many of the surgeries that used to require overnight stays are now being day-only surgeries, and then you go home. With all these changes, what's the destination to be up in that area, other than if you put in a bunch of high-density housing and you're simply going home?
Mary Abrams, Melinda Coleman, and their tag-along council members, rubber stamp council members, I think they have this vision that they're omnipotent, and they just, because they're big wealth brokers and power dealers, they're just saying, they're waving their wand, or they're so declaring it, and it will be so. And is that a definition of delusional, or is this structured action planning?
Well, let's take a look at appointed Mayor Marley Abrams.
Incorporating the hospital and all the medical facilities over there with that area, because right now they're really separated, and unless you consciously either drive, you could walk, but it's not going to be convenient. So you're going to drive. There isn't a direct connection, and I think having a direct connection would be very good for that area.
So I only got to 2 of them, and then I didn't capture your third one, which is around that connection on...
Connectivity?
Yeah.
So that the hospital is actually part of, I mean, it is part of it now, but there's a separation, and that separation is Route 1. And unless you want to drive from the hospital, you could walk from the hospital over to the mall, but you're going to have to skirt around.
This is appointed Mary Marley Abrams. She's concerned that there's a separation between the hospital and the mall. I think she has this impression that the people who are working at the hospital, that during their lunch break, that they want to pop on over to the mall and go get a pair of earrings or something.
Or a waffle.
Or a waffle. and
or
that,
go see the kangaroo.
Yeah, you know, they have little baby kangaroos now at the Maplewood Mall. So if you'd like to go see a baby kangaroo, you could actually do that now at the Maplewood Mall. They've got quite a few little new innovative things going on over there to increase the foot traffic that, of course, this council doesn't even acknowledge is going on. They think the mall is going to die. Actually, the mall has been doing a lot of creative types of things which are consistent with the trends nationally for many of the various shopping malls to do different kinds of things for events and activities and whatever to bring people and foot traffic to the mall.
And I don't know if you'd say they're thinking it's going to die. I actually think they're hoping it's going to die. They're praying that it's going to die. They're setting up what they can from the government angle to make sure it dies, to kill it, to stomp it out.
Well, and see, in the comments that appointed Mayor Marley Abrams makes about how she's concerned that there's no connectivity between the hospital and the mall, under their plan, they've got it such that half of the mall is demolished and actually is not even there anymore and is replaced by high-density housing. So if you're taking away 50% of the attraction, and then you're concerned about the connectivity, do those two things seem like you're on the same brainwave at all? They just simply don't.
And I'm actually shocked that she's, shock and awe, that she's worried about this connectivity piece, because I thought part of the extravagant vision was to eliminate cars there, and that's why they're going to have bicycles and walking And bigger than anything else, they're going to have the BRT.
Right, and so that's the point, is that she's concerned about that connectivity. She doesn't want people to have to get in their cars at the hospital to go over to the mall. But today, they could go and take a bike, couldn't they?
They could.
They could do that, I'm sure they could. But people aren't doing that because they don't want to do that. And maybe they don't have a reason to go that direction, and maybe they're happy with the restaurant that's close to the hospital. And, oh, by the way, the one that would be torn down when Maplewood finds that developer to put its hotel there. Now let's take a look as appointed Mayor Marley Abrams continues to talk about her timeline and her big vision.
Hey, what's the time horizon for that?
20 years.
That's a 20.
Well, all of it.
Well, if you wanted to see a housing project within 2.
Oh, I thought you said 20.
No, 2.
Within 2 years?
Within 2 years.
Oh.
So I'll add a 0. Jeff, I'll take all the stress out of you.
Well, I would like to see it all done in 20 years.
What can we do?
Revision.
What can we do?
First she says she wants the housing development in 2 years, and then she realizes, whoops, she misheard the question. Well, now it's 20 years, and she wants everything done in 20 years. And does she really know what she really wants? Well, this discussion continues.
Rezoning can be done?
And I would like to see within 2 years, one project of redevelopment, and have that either underway or close to completion.
Okay, no, that's.
One project.
What?
Appointed Mayor Marley Abrams wants, okay, she's got it narrowed down. She wants to have one project started or nearly completed. Well, isn't that consistent with what we heard the other commissioners say? A hotel, if a developer comes forward, and remember, the city's been showing developers Birch Run Shopping Mall. Gee whiz, if a developer comes forward, they could have a hotel in 2 years. Wow, it's all coming together. It's gelling. And yet we're thinking to ourselves, gee, do any of these people on the council have any business experience, any idea what business is about? Well, during the break, Joe Sheeran, the marketing director, he had some ideas about that subject. Let's take a look.
Because we don't have a local chamber of commerce, we share between White Bear and St. Paul. What we don't have, what we really need is someone on staff or on the council, and if you guys are one of those, great, let's keep building that relationship. But we don't have somebody who is the liquor store owner or is the pizza shop owner to really get those medium and small businesses, because here's the issue. When we put out the business award, the business community, we didn't have a good enough pool of those small and medium-sized businesses who are going to engage with that kind of thing. And when we need to get people to things like the Maplewood Business Association and meetings like this, having those, hey, Bill, hey, Tom, hey, Tyrone, hey, John, come on over. We need those kinds of things, and I don't, my opportunity is, how do we get to that? How do we, like the mayor's doing a great job, and Sylvia's doing a great job of reaching out to our faith community. How do we reach out to that small business community is my big thing.
So Joe thinks the answer is, in order to get the business community more involved with what City Hall is doing, is that we're going to have to get somebody on the council. He even said on staff. What does that mean? Why would you have a pizza parlor owner, have their own shop and work for on staff at City Hall as well? They'd have 2 jobs. I don't think he understands how hard it is to be the owner of a hospitality industry-based business and then thinking that they're going to work at City Hall too. It must mean that when you work at City Hall, you don't really have much to do. One or the other, I don't know.
Well, or it could be that he's thinking that, and he's just not, even though he's a communication director, maybe he's not always communicating as brilliantly as he should.
So now when we continue with the meeting, they have already had a discussion about the development along the streets of Larpenteur and Rice, and that particular report we have on the Citizens Reporter this week, so you'll want to watch for that. But in that part of the meeting, while they're talking about what is happening with redevelopment efforts in the intersection of Frost and Larpenteur on the west side of Maplewood, appointed Mayor Marley Abrams makes a very important statement in comparing that area with the Gladstone development area, Frost and English. So let's take a look at that.
Whereas, well, Frost English is totally within our city, and we have much more control and much more, we have much more control over this one than we do with that.
The contrast is in the area of Larpenteur and Rice, in that neighborhood, Maplewood has to work together with not only Ramsey County, but St. Paul and Roseville. And her point is that in the Gladstone neighborhood, it's all Maplewood. We have total control. That means no accountability by anybody.
Oh, but doesn't that mean there's just going to be big, big, big things happening?
Wow.
Because the visionaries are right there. They are the cherry on the cake.
You're not going to have anybody pushing back at Maplewood's big ideas.
Well, we know the biggest idea, the central core value of Mary Abrams is control. Control. That's why I think she probably eliminated citizen input. That's why she eliminated public access. That's why there's no citizens forum.
Well, let's look at our next clip, which now leads us into their discussions about the Gladstone redevelopment.
So yeah, this is just meant to be a big picture overview of how we started planning there, what happened since then, where we're at now. I know there's others in the room that, like Joy and Councilmember Juneman, that worked on the creation of the plan, and I know Melinda was here, so.
You'll notice they had one of their poster boards up on the easel. That is what they are working from. That is the agenda. That is the meeting packet that was never posted for the public. Again, wouldn't the public have wanted to know about the discussion points for this meeting? And did you notice right up near the top of that list was cheerleading? Wow, cheerleading. Now, if we wouldn't have been there, would you have known that one of the main focus points of this council in their redevelopment is cheerleading? Oh my goodness.
I think that's the expectation from Melinda Coleman of all the council members. Melinda Coleman and Mary Abrams, who seem to be joined at the hip, is that if you want a seat at this table, we expect you to be out cheerleading. Cheerleading for us,
yes,
and cheerleading for our re-election, or cheerleading for our appointment, or cheerleading for more control to us.
And keep in mind, we covered a few weeks ago where we covered the meeting where the Maplewood City Council actually stripped away the statutory powers from the Housing and Economic Development Commission and gave all of that power to the council under the guise of the Economic Development Authority.
Sticking to our core principle of control.
Yes.
Now let's take a look at our next clip.
But Gladstone is the city's original business district. The neighborhood was built around the railroad. Some level of rail usage still existed in that neighborhood as recent as 1986. So just to give some context of why we talk so much about the history of the rail uses in that area. The city passed a referendum in the 90s allotting funds towards the purchase of properties throughout the city for open spaces. In 1994, the Gladstone Savannah was purchased for that purpose of maintaining that open space. There had been concern in the neighborhood that the Savannah would be redeveloped, would be used for some other purpose, so this, the city dollars helped put the neighborhood at ease and conserve that area. And then open space also serves as that historical sites, again, relating back to the use of the rail yard.
Back in 2004 and 2005, the city, though, did have big plans to develop a portion of that savanna. Guess what? With high-density housing. That's what they were going to put there. And there was an uproar of the whole Gladstone neighborhood all around throughout there. Now, you heard him say that the city then expended money and put money into helping to trim up and take better care of the savanna to allay the concerns of the neighborhood that they weren't going to develop it. You know, if they didn't want to develop it, they actually would have put a conservation easement on it, that it would have protected it forever. And actually, when I was mayor, I proposed that, and there was so much pushback on that from the administrative people at City Hall and even some of my own council members that, heaven forbid, they did not want to tie the hands of future councils. So instead the city said, well, we'll plant a few trees, we'll put in some native grasses, we'll trim up some of the things that are kind of shaggy there, and because of that you'll feel much better that we're going to keep it forever.
And of course, the thing they did do too is they came in and overnight, in a day or two, they cut down all the long-standing heritage and legacy trees. And in place in their trimming, they put up little scrambly trees.
Right, well, yeah, because they didn't like where the mature trees were. And we have shown film footage of that cutting and shredding process.
Doesn't that make complete sense that all the public who live around there are happy they took down the old-time mature trees to put little twigs up that might grow in the next 75 years? I guess that was supposed to be the hope, that when we clear cut it, you know we're going to save it because we're putting trees up and we expect them to grow over the next 100 years.
But if they could cut down...
That shows their commitment.
Right, but if they could cut down and shred mature trees, why would a couple of very young, immature trees ever stop them? Well, let's continue with the discussion about the Gladstone redevelopment.
In the 2000s, then the city started to look at how you build off the savanna then, and as, keeping the neighborhood vibrant. Commercial areas in that neighborhood primarily were starting to lag behind, more tired. The city wanted to start a small area planning process, hoping to capitalize mainly on Gladstone's location. It's a good distance, or a short distance to both downtowns. The neighborhood itself is in the middle of multiple regional recreational resources. So those constraints or opportunities, I guess, still hold true today for that neighborhood. Its location is probably its greatest asset.
Did you notice in that clip that Mr. Martin twice started to say something, but it was a negative adjective, and then he corrected himself to make it a positive adjective? He talked about first that the constraints of the Gladstone neighborhood, no, the opportunities. No, I don't mean constraints, I mean opportunities. And then that it was a long distance. No, it's a short distance from downtown, both towns. It's like, well, get it straight. Which is it? I mean, these are the planners. You got to understand what your neighborhood that you're trying to develop is all about. And if we can't even get our adjectives right, how can we get our development right? Well,
Boy,
now,
isn't he as cool as a cucumber?
Well, let's take a look at our last clip.
And then today, we're also throwing in potential light bus rapid transit line going through it, so even furthering its importance of application. So then the small area plan started to be developed. The plan itself does identify that Gladstone, change in Gladstone would not happen without heavy involvement by the city, meaning direct action from the city and direct investment from the city. This is due to older parcels, how they're laid out, not being suited for new developments. Multiple lots need to be assembled. So these, again, if we look at projects that have occurred, this is exactly what happened where the city had to help facilitate site assemblage.
You heard him say it. The city had to help with the site assemblage. Now, at what cost? When you have megalomania running rampant, no cost is too high. And so what exactly does Maplewood own in the Gladstone neighborhood? Good question. What did they pay for those parcels? What are those parcels worth? Now, Mr. Berglund, it's public knowledge to go down to the county tax records and look up parcels, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, no one's not saying that there's not some transparency in Ramsey County.
Because it's required that when you buy or sell real estate, you have to file something that's called a CRV, a Certificate of Real Estate Value. So that way it's clear to the public why and how a transaction occurred. Is it at arm's length? What was the market value? What was the sale price? Well, let's take a look at this one parcel that Maplewood owns.
Because you won't find this in Maplewood's documentation of their city council meetings. Of course, this is something that Maplewood is extremely interested in, and all the city planners would be very interested in this.
That's right. So there is a little lot of land, barely big enough to build a house on, a single family house on it. And it's right next to the Sherman and Associates apartment building right there on Frost Avenue. This particular parcel was purchased in 2017 for $59,000. Now, Mr. Berglund, what's your guess as to the market value of this little tiny bitty parcel that I'm not even sure is big enough to build a single family home on?
Well, and I'm thinking your extremely positive city planner is saying it's all tired out, so I'm assuming it's probably worth $100,000.
Ding, ding, ding. You're wrong. No, according to Ramsey County Assessor's Office, the assessment value of this land and its value is $23,400. The city of Maplewood paid over 100% of its value to acquire this little teeny bitty piece of property that is next to Sherman and Associates. That Sherman and Associates certainly could just simply buy on their own if they needed it for their own assemblage. However, Sherman and Associates didn't need it for their assemblage, and so now Maplewood, who will they sell that little thing to?
I don't think Melinda Coleman and Mary Abrams is going to do very good on The Price is Right. They're overbidding. But that's not bidding. They're actually paying city taxpayer dollars.
They're overbidding. Well, let's talk about that Moose Lodge, right? Now, they just bought that in 2019, and that they bought for $900,000. That's what it says here in the CRV. Although at the closed meeting, they authorized the city to actually pay more than that. But this Ramsey County actually lists the cost of that property as $1 million to purchase because of the need to demolish the building that's there. Now, Mr. Berglund, what do you think the combined value is of the land and the building?
Well, we know the city always gets a great deal, probably 1.5 million.
Nope, the combined value with the building there is $852,000. So the city overpaid, but they have to pay for the demolition of the building. So you see the value of the land only by itself, if you look at land only, is $548,000. Now next we have, oh, you mean Maplewood owns another parcel in Gladstone? You mean there's more than two? Oh, sure, there's more than two. Of course. Now this particular parcel is was purchased back in, let's see here, 2017. Now this particular parcel is land only, and this is west of the intersection of Frost and English roundabout. Many people who live in that area, you know that there's the Savannah, and then there's this piece of property, and then there's the Boat Works company. Well, that little piece of land that had a little building on it where sometimes people would park old junker cars and stuff, that's the piece of land we're talking about. Okay, now that piece of land, that was purchased back in 2017. They purchased that land for $250,000. That's what that land was purchased for. Ramsey County has a land value for that land only as $144,000. Maplewood overpaid $100,000 for a piece of land. Now, is that the end of all the properties that Maplewood owns in the Gladstone neighborhood? No! Ding, ding, ding! We got another one. Can you imagine that? We've got 4. And maybe by the time this broadcast is done, there'll be 5 for all we know, since they are megalomaniacs up there at City Hall, and that money means nothing. They will do anything for their plan, and they are just buying whatever they can, whether it's of value to the residents or not. This particular parcel is on Frost Avenue, across from the old City Hall, which is now the Filipino Center. And that particular property was purchased back in 2018. That parcel was purchased for $275,000. The market value, according to the Ramsey County Assessor, of that parcel is $262,000. This is the only parcel where they're somewhat close, except that that particular building, they also have to demolish because it's full of mold and there's been a lot of damage to the building over time.
And of course, the age of the building, I'm sure it has all kinds of hazardous waste. You can be assured there's a lot of asbestos in it. So I don't think they're going to bring in the city crew, bulldozer, and a non-snow season and just push it down and then throw it into one of the city wetlands, even as much as they might like to do that.
Yes, exactly. Well, Mr. Berglund, we've come to the end of this week's newscast. We will continue next week with more news on this meeting and their discussion of the Gladstone redevelopment, because there is indeed more than what we've even talked about here. But thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And viewers, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.